Welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the Emmys, Oscars, SAG, and Tonys races. Who is in the running? What makes an award-worthy performance? And what are the secrets to giving one? These intimate, inspirational conversations with some of today's most talented stars provide you, dear listener, the kind of craft and career advice that could win you a statue of your own, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
It's so great that you're worried it's going to be taken away. And so I wish I had gone, I wish that I could go back on my first day and have someone tell me, like, just so you know, you're going to be here for 12 and a half years. And then I really would have enjoyed all of it.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm very happy
For
to be
people
back.
who might not remember your exact voice, who are you again?
I'm Elise.
Elise.
I'm a senior editor here at Backstage.
How have you been?
I've been great. It's been Emmy's frenzy.
Emmy's frenzy for you,
Yeah.
not so much Tony's frenzy.
Not so much Tony's frenzy.
But still very, very busy. Well, we've been busy. This is our final episode of the last month of straight every Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've been working very hard. Jamie's been working very hard. Thank you, Jamie. But it's all been worth it because these interviews have been great.
Yeah, this has been a great lineup.
It's such a great lineup. And to cap us off, this is our last episode before, because we are in Emmy nominating now, where this is ending our Emmys episodes. Our guest today is Seth Meyers.
Yes, one of my absolute faves. I have been annoying you to no end about...
Not annoying.
Just from the beginning of this process to the end,
Mm-hmm.
I have not shut up about your interactions with Seth Meyers.
Now, why is that? Is it partly because of the Illinois connection? Yeah.
Yes, that. But I also just think he's one of the smartest, funniest. Yeah. He gives lots of opportunities to female writers of color.
Sure.
And you can just tell his show is so smart.
Yeah.
And his so much of the best of SNL during his time was written by him or co-written by him.
Do you have like a favorite Seth Meyers moment? Like of all of the things he's ever done?
That's such a good question.
Is it Stefan with Bill Hader?
Yeah,
Stefan
I think when
Hader.
Seth was leaving the show, I think that was when they did the Stefan and they did a whole...
One of them was leaving.
It was one of them was leaving.
Yeah.
They did a wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Seth has like the Stefan like little Russian doll on his desk. And I also have one.
Okay, you're hardcore.
Yeah. It's
I would say this interview is like both super backstagey and has lots of like advice for getting into comedy, getting into writing, his rise to success is super, super interesting and there's stuff to take from that. But at the same time, not a typical In the Envelope interview at all. He's not an actor.
No, but he works with performers all the time, right. And he was a performer. He just didn't particularly take to that lifestyle.
He's pretty self-deprecating about that. And one thing about this interview, listeners, we did actually do, kind of for the first time, we did audience questions. We did take a couple questions from Twitter. I think it was like a really hopeful, like hearing about him auditioning for SNL and then crying at 30 Rockefeller Center. That's like a good backstagey story.
Yeah, and everyone loves a good SNL audition story.
Totally. How do you get onto SNL? That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the secret is all of the user-submitted questions were from me.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Not true, but they might as well have been.
At Secret Seth Meyers fan. Elise, thank you so much for joining us again. You and I are signing off until whenever the next round of episodes is, which may be after Emmy nominations. And the Envelope listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and you're in for a treat. This is a good one.
Thanks for having me.
A fixture of late-night TV, specifically at the headquarters of NBC at 30 Rockefeller Center, Seth Meyers is the host of the acclaimed Late Night with Seth Meyers. With roots in Illinois, Michigan, and New Hampshire, Seth studied comedy in Chicago and Amsterdam before auditioning for Saturday Night Live in 2001, where he worked for 13 years as a performer, head writer, and Weekend Update host. Here it is, our interview from Seth's late night offices on the 8th floor of 30 Rock. Feel free to hi. Hi. Jack.
What's your name, sorry?
I'm Jack.
Hi, Jack.
Jack Smart.
Hi, Jane.
What's up?
Not much. How are you?
Are we recording?
I am recording.
Thank you so much for...
My pleasure.
It's good to see a behind-the-scenes
Yes.
look at the process. What's up today? Is today a typical day in the life?
Yeah, it's pretty typical.
Good.
Pretty normal. But it's nice when you, get to do it every day. You tend to get in a rhythm. And
In a good way?
Yeah, in a good way. There aren't a lot of days that completely throw us off our axis, which is a nice feeling.
Yeah.
Particularly coming from SNL, where I feel like it happened a lot more.
Yeah, which is like the boot camp for any other...
Yeah, everything's a
Doing this.
little bit easier after that.
Everything.
Yeah.
Childbirth, everything.
Childbirth. Well, I would say, I bet my wife would take issue with me saying childbirth was a breeze.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's talking about that. I know everyone talked about your second child being born in the hallway of the
Lobby.
building. And
The
yeah.
lobby baby. He's just turned one. He's
pretty
totally
legendary.
normal now. It turns out you can have a baby in a lobby and they have a completely normal upbringing.
Who'd have thunk?
Yeah.
That's great. So, we're with Backstage magazine.
Great.
Are you familiar with us? Did you ever?
I'm familiar with Backstage magazine, but not as a...
You weren't
yeah.
circling auditions.
No,
for-
I wasn't. Yeah.
You were never like a struggling New York actor type.
I think that's a very good thing because based on the quality of New York actors, I think I would have continued to struggle.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that too because this podcast is mostly geared towards actors, so I think you're a really interesting guest because I really like when you talk shit about your own acting on SNL.
Yeah, I have no problem talking shit about my own acting. If you feel like that will
I don't think it's bad
bring
at
joy
all.
to our listeners, I'm happy to talk about it.
But we do like hearing the perspective of people,
Sure.
early career struggling artists.
Yes.
So, first of all, where did you come from? What was the journey?
I born in Chicago and worked our way around a little bit, but mostly I would say I grew up in New Hampshire,
Right.
in the suburbs, and went to a wonderful public high school and had a great experience there, but did not do stage stuff, did not have the confidence to try out for school plays. But we did do a couple of comedy nights, my brother and I and some friends of ours, which were nothing more really than just doing a couple of written scripts, a couple of old Monty Python sketches or SNL sketches, that sort of thing. But they were very well attended, and I would say that was the first time I got a taste of the addiction.
Of the performing aspect of it.
Yeah, performing and positive feedback.
Right. And when you say attended, were you also kind of in a hosting position?
Not really at that point. Yeah, I mean, I was I was considered a funny person in high school, but more from I think back of the class kind of funny as opposed to front of the class funny. With that said, we had TVs in the homerooms, and my friends and I would record morning announcements, on those giant old video cameras. So there were elements of performance, but it wasn't until I went to Northwestern. I was a radio, television, film major. My plan going there was I'm going to be a movie director. And my new student week at Northwestern, I saw Northwestern's improv troupe, which is a improv. I did not realize at the time, but as college improv troupes go, Meow is a pretty good one.
Gotcha.
Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Steve Colbert.
Sure.
Over the years, they've fed a lot of people into
Chicago in general has a great
Chicago in general. It made
improv.
sense that Northwestern would have a good one.
Yeah.
And so that became my goal, which was to do that college improv troupe. And then I auditioned every year, and I only got in my senior year.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, that's what we like hearing about.
Yeah. I did, I started going, I would take the subway into Chicago and the L, I should say. It's an elevated subway in Chicago.
The L.
Not even a subway. I don't know why I keep saying sub. But
You're a New Yorker now.
Yes, an elevated train. But I would take the L to Chicago, and there was a theater there called Improv Olympic, and I took classes there,
Oh, okay.
and I would go see shows there, and that was a real golden age of improv in Chicago. So that was the first time I laid eyes on people like Tina Fey and Horatio Sands and Rachel Dratch, Amy Poehler, and Colbert, Carell.
Whoa.
And it was great. I realize now, at the time I thought, oh my God, everyone's so good at improv. And then I realized, no, I just happened to be in the very specific place where people were great.
Gotcha.
And so,
Yeah.
but then I took classes. And then my senior year at Northwestern, I finally got into the improv troupe. And despite, also having made my parents pay for a very expensive education, I realized I think I'm going to try to be an improviser. I think I'm going to leave this with a diploma and the goal to be an improviser.
Because that's what I was going to ask, is like, at what point did this become first the idea of a career? Like, oh, this could be a career. And then at what point was it the career?
I do remember standing on stage for our last college show and thinking, all right, I'm going to try to do this until it seems irrational. I'll at least throw it out there. And so then I moved to Chicago and I started waiting tables, and I would improvise. And pretty quickly, there was sort of our backstage was there's a Chicago paper called The Reader that had audition notices, and there was an audition notice for an improv theater in Amsterdam. In the Netherlands.
Right.
Called Boom Chicago.
This is the next chapter.
This is the next chapter. And it happened pretty quickly. It was only about 6 months after I graduated. But some Chicago guys had gone to Amsterdam and they had started sort of a Second City inspired theater there. And they had auditions. And we went as a lark. The auditions, my best friend and I went. And it was 3 days of auditions. It was, I feel like it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And on Saturday night, we got a call saying, we want you to move to Amsterdam. And at the time, I didn't have a passport. I didn't have much of a plan. But it was that great thing of being an age where, you kind of go, well, I'm 23.
You're right after college, right?
Yeah. I mean, I might as well.
Lean into the chaos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I did.
Sure.
For every element of it. Even if it had meant nothing for me career-wise, if it hadn't moved the football at all there, it was so great to live in Europe for a couple of years, particularly there. And as European countries went, I feel like it's hard to find a place where the English is better than Holland. So you could actually do comedy, and you didn't feel like it had to be, slapstick, all physical comedy. You could actually do verbal comedy, which
I see.
We'll give you guys a little insight. Verbal comedy is kind of my bread and butter, but it was great. And the best thing about it was just the stage reps. I think it was 2 years where I was basically doing 200 shows a year, and so there's there's no replacement for that as far as learning your own skill set.
Boot camp, right? Yeah. And getting familiar with your own voice. Is it safe to say?
Very much so.
And your skills.
Yep.
And what's the ratio of like acting and writing there?
Half and half. I mean, we wrote our own shows, so it was a great, chance to try things, see how they went. And because you did a show every night, you could rewrite it the next afternoon, try it again. And, those are obviously things that the rest of my career has had in common with. Yeah. But it was a great incubator for ideas and trying to figure out what made an audience that had a lot of different, some nights were tourist heavy, some nights were Dutch heavy, some nights were older, some nights were younger. And it was great to try to find that middle of an audience every night. Yeah,
that's challenging.
Yeah.
You got to adapt to that.
And exciting. I mean, there is still that thrill of, and even now, rarely, but there are times where I perform abroad. And it's so exciting to make people laugh in a different country. Like, it feels a little bit like a superpower. It makes you think, oh, okay, these are all variations of the people I grew up with. Making them laugh is just a extrapolation out from what I would have expected. But if you can go other places and make people laugh, it's really fun.
Okay. So I've heard it. I feel like these days, especially in the world of comedy, people don't compartmentalize actor or writer. It's all kind of lumped together. First of all, you mentioned movie director.
Yeah.
Did that fade, or was that still?
It faded pretty quick for me. Okay. When I went to college, I realized how much patience it requires to be a film director and how many decisions you have to make. That ultimately, being a director is just, do you feel confident making decisions and owning them? Yes. A level of ego is required. And I don't mean it in a negative way when I say an ego. Like, you want the people in charge on a movie set to believe in themselves and believe in the choices they make. Right. And I am such a second guesser. That's why improvising was great for me. One, improvising was great for me because you didn't have time to second guess. And writing, is I also like because you can procrastinate in a way that I don't think you can. You can't show up as a director on the movie set and say, hey, I'm going to need one more day. Send home all the lighting guys.
Right.
We don't need sound today.
Maybe there's more wiggle room in the writer's life. Yeah.
So that, and I think I always identified the most as a writer.
Sure.
And the performing was this really nice gravy for me.
And is it safe to say that performing up on stage, especially for like a variety of audiences, helps then the writing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, especially, the writing for yourself, the things, the more you say things on stage, the more you learn to write for yourself on stage.
Okay,
whereas at SNL, you learn to write for other actors by watching them.
Totally. Yeah. For years and years and years. Like,
yeah.
You had a head start with people like Tina Fey, where like, I feel like one of your guys' skills is writing for other people.
Yes.
Stuff that they can do that is funny because it's them.
And the things they can do that you can't. I don't want to speak for Tina, but the hardest thing when I started at SNL, I started as a cast member, and all cast members are sort of asked, or there's an expectation they'll write for themselves as well.
Oh.
But I just started writing for other people because they all had these really cool toolboxes that I didn't have. I felt like I showed up with a hammer, and then everybody else had like that drill that has like 85 different attachments, and you're like, wow, as much as I'd like to be on camera this week, I feel like if I wrote this for Will Ferrell, it would maybe get on TV. So
just be better. I see.
So I was actually told a lot early on to try to find a way, like focus more on writing for yourself and a little bit less for other people. But the way I survived was I wrote a lot of group sketches where I would have a couple of lines, but ultimately the success and failure of the sketch wasn't entirely on me.
More of a supporting role.
I tried to be the lead behind the camera and the supporting role on camera.
That's amazing. And like these, like you said, you didn't know it was a golden age or like a group of people that was like going to kind of change comedy
very much
mainstream.
Yeah.
You were just kind of following your gut the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I would have ended up in Chicago if it wasn't for the fact that my parents had gone to school there, and I don't know if I would have gone downtown and seen Second City if my parents hadn't said it was a thing they did when they were in college. And so there were a lot of just good pieces of luck, and then also when I then came back from Amsterdam and found my way to a SNL audition, all those people that I used to see, there were so many of them were then at SNL, not just on camera, but also on the writing staff. Wow. And so that was an era too where the pipeline to SNL was very Chicago-centric. Chicago still feeds the show, but I think it's less the main road that it was in the early 2000s.
You had
UCB
late 90s. And you had...
Yeah, well, it made sense because a lot of Chicago migrated to New York in that, UCB is very much a Chicago-inspired theater, and it used to be that I think people from New York, if they wanted to be improvisers, would feel the need to go to Chicago. And I think when you look at UCB in LA and UCB in New York, it's a lot less unique what's happening in Chicago. I still think there's something unique about a Chicago audience that I highly recommend for young people who are trying to get their start. I mean, Chicago's a little bit more affordable, and it is that nice middle of the country audience that, and I don't mean that to be derisive in any way. Chicago's full of really smart people and really theater-committed people, but also that intelligent theater-going audiences from all walks of life. It's not just a entertainment professional that goes to shows in Chicago.
Sure. It's kind of like, I mean, people must ask you all the time, like, where should I go to do comedy and how do I do the comedy? And is there like one piece of advice you always give?
Well, the strangest thing is just how much comedy's changed even in the 20 years. I think if 20 years ago you'd asked me, I would say, I think Chicago's a great place to go right after college. Sure. I don't know if that's as necessary now. Also, 20 years ago, nobody was getting discovered based on videos they were posting online.
From their living rooms or whatever.
Yeah. And, I think that in general, probably true of not just comedy, but any sort of form of performing, like it changed, the generationally has such giant shifts. But the one thing I'll say is, 20 years ago it was like, get up on a stage, and now it might be, upload videos. But I think you want to just increase the odds that you will be seen by somebody who matters. So if you were a stand-up, find your way up on stage, because ultimately good things can't happen if you're at home. So, increase your own odds. Try to make your own luck.
Increase your own odds, which another way of saying that is also like build a community and build connections, right?
Yeah. I mean, when especially, we do a Q&A most nights, and like audience members will ask, that
cool.
advice. And it is like, there are these communities and certainly, unfortunately, in some cases you have to pay for classes, which I know is hard for people, but there are always places to go where you can find other like-minded people. And if you're a writer, you need other people to read it. No one is a good enough writer to also be able to judge their work,
Without someone else's.
Yeah, without bias. And so
that's great advice too. Yeah.
And also, somebody from every group, someone will break through first. Someone will get into the real world of professional show business first. And so they tend to throw the ladder down. And the other thing I would say about that is I think sometimes people think, I'm going to start being a nice person when I get hired at a real job.
Oh, no.
But you want to say no, because everyone will remember how you behaved your whole life. So if you think that you're someone who will one day need a favor, start being someone who is worthy of a favor now.
Yeah. The thinking of I'll be nice later doesn't track.
I mean, I will.
Also,
I'll reflect back on me. It wasn't nice, but I was an intern at Comedy Central in the summer of '95.
Before Amsterdam,
college, before my senior year of college, and okay. It was a really fun internship, but I think it dawned on me about halfway through that I wasn't actually doing work that was being noticed or recognized. It's just busy work.
Internship.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And then I just kind of coasted through thinking that no one would notice, and they did. I then remember just going to my boss, and he said, "Hey, I just want to give you an evaluation. We all thought you were really good, and then we all thought you were kind of really bad." And it just I remember feeling it in my chest because, I thought I was smart enough to get away with doing it on my own terms. And realizing, no, good managers and good people who are then looking to, elevate staff, they also pay attention to the people who have the least important job to make sure they do it with a level of appreciation that you would then want them to have on the next job up.
I see. People notice.
I would say that to young people.
Yeah.
People notice.
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you remember about the SNL audition? You just had the one.
Yeah, I just had the one. So I had not been crushing it. I had gone out to LA for 6 months, and I got cast in I did one episode of Spin City with Charlie Sheen, and then who was lovely. I remember all the years later when things fell apart, my first thought was, he was a lovely guy to me. Okay. And I was just a day player. But then I auditioned twice via tape. They'd asked you to put yourself on tape.
Cool.
And again, this is... that there's a moment that will happen to all of you. I don't know if it's happened to you yet, where you realize when you talk about your past, it's like 7 technologies back. Where I had to find a friend with a camera. Yeah. I had to go to his house. His camera recorded it on the little videotape that then you had to take to a storefront that would transfer it onto VHS.
Sure.
Then you'd take that to a Kinko's. You couldn't send somebody a link. It was just...
Totally.
And I remember when I started SNL, you used to go in the talent department. It was just stacks and stacks of VHS tapes. Now, mercifully, there's
no wonder it's hard to get in.
Exactly. With that said, links get lost on emails too.
Sure.
But
sure.
I sent in a tape, and then 6 months later they asked for a second tape, and and by the way, this was a woman who had seen me doing a 2-person show in Chicago.
On stage.
Oh,
okay.
And that had sort of started the ball rolling. And then they said they were going to fly me in for an audition, and I've never worked harder on an audition. And for me, I always had trouble. And again, I don't want to seem like I really do think, because I've been around great actors and great cold readers and people at SNL who you could tell them what you wanted them to do and they would just bring it alive 20 seconds later. If I had just been given a script and had 2 weeks to work on a script, I just don't think, I think I would have overthought it and it would have just had no life to it. But because the SNL audition was writing it as well, it became this living thing for me.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to keep working on it and keep trying to find new ways to approach it. And so it always stayed new enough for me to, I think, be, it brought the best out of me, that format.
Okay.
And I didn't know Rachel Dratch, but I had a friend of a friend who knew her, and I talked to her on the phone, and she gave me great advice, which wasn't even advice. It was more a thing that I then passed along to everybody I ever talked to, which is no one will laugh. Because it's a really tight room. But the reality is, it's not no one. You will get some laughs. But if you're told no one will laugh and then you get 3 laughs, you feel great.
Right.
You know, because then you think, oh my God, I got the first 3 laughs that ever happened here. And and my audition went, you know, it went well. Like, and I say that as someone who is a very harsh judge of my own talents and results, but it was, I kind of walked off thinking, oh, all right.
Like, if you hadn't gotten it, you would have been like, that was my best audition.
Yes. Yeah. And that was, I will say, not to be too maudlin, I did not realize how emotional it had been to audition for Saturday Night Live, which was my favorite show. I literally walked outside, sat outside of 30 Rock, and just started to sob.
Where outside? Where exactly? What street?
I feel like it was like things they don't. I feel like they used to have like benches around the trees outside of 30 Rock, and that I don't know. I feel like
get farther away enough from the building in case somebody sees you.
I didn't even. I don't think so.
You could make it that far.
I couldn't even make it that far.
I love hearing about that stuff. Public breakdowns, that's great.
Yeah, it was a good public breakdown.
That's great.
Again, it's New York City though. Like you can't walk. Everybody's crying.
Yeah.
Like you can't go 2 or 3 blocks without seeing someone having a breakdown.
Completely.
Yeah.
You have to do it on the subway.
Well, the other great thing is in New York, you feel very confident that it's not like anybody's going to stop. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
So I think, I mean, if you have a breakdown in like Indianapolis, some nice Midwesterner is going to take you back to their house and make you soup. But in New York City, it's like, oh boy, another one.
Yeah. It's something isolating, but in a good way, maybe.
Yeah, it is.
Can be.
Ultimately, your bedroom or a main thoroughfare in New York City are about as private a place.
Yeah.
To cry. Yeah.
Yeah. It's both soul-crushingly depressing and like kind of great, you know. Are there impersonations that you had to do in the audition? That was part of the...
remember, this is 2001. Russell Crowe, David Arquette, Hugh Grant. Boom, boom, boom. There they are.
Those are the 3.
Those were the 3. Really, and again, very useful 2001 auditions.
Very 2001.
Yeah. Then I think in the end, I only did Hugh Grant once on the show.
Uh-huh.
But, and then my producer here now, Mike Shoemaker, who was there then, I tried doing Russell Crowe and then finally was told, you cannot do Russell Crowe on television because your head is exactly half the size this is. And the one thing you can't do with an impression is change the size of your head.
The shape of the head?
The size of the head. You know, like that thing. Like, look, you're looking at me right now. It's not, like, no part of this is like reading Russell Crowe to you.
Not really.
Yeah.
But I've not thought of him as like...
Oh, yeah, it's a big head.
So you know everyone.
I've learned... I will say...
You have all the dish.
You realize a lot of movie stars, most movie stars have really big heads. I think they do. They're not
metaphorically.
No, I'm both. But a big head looks really good on television, like on screen.
On screen? Okay.
Yeah. There are very few actors who end up having smaller heads than you think they would have. Newsmen too.
Okay.
Like when newsmen are on the show, a lot of them are taller than you think, and they all have big watermelon heads.
I'm gonna have to think about this next time I see anyone on TV at this point. This is such a cheesy question, but I get asked because I want to ask about interviewing.
Yes, okay.
And maybe even what that has to do with like acting and performing and like the art of listening and the art of like responding and reacting.
Yeah.
Get the tacky question out of the way first. Like, who has been a favorite person of yours to interview, like in your lifetime, or even just met or worked with on SNL?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I've been working specifically in this building with the same ID pass since 2001. So I've crossed paths with a lot of great people.
Right.
I mean, some of my favorite SNL hosts are Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Justin Timberlake. John Hamm was somebody who really surprised me and the kind of performer he was. And then here, there are people like, Joan Rivers was one of my favorite interviews ever, but it wasn't really an interview. I just set her up for jokes. There was nothing genuine or honest about the interaction. I was just one of the other audience members with a better seat.
Right.
But those, and it also felt like, I think what talk show appearances were like in the 70s, that you just like, as a Johnny Carson, you just would say things like, do you have a family? And then they would do 5 minutes on their family. Yeah. And so...
you like those guests?
I like the longer that you do this, what kind of guests you have. You figure it out in the first couple questions, and some people need your help.
Yeah.
Some people look at you. Some people look at the audience, when they tell a story. And you realize that's up to them. I like to just... I feel as though it's my job to be the reactive one, and it's my job to see what they need. And some people need help.
Yeah.
And some people really would... are better served if you sort of stay out of the way and let them do their thing.
Right.
And so, but really, if there was, the interviewing part was no other job I'd had before had anything in common with that, save for being a listener and listening being such a key skill to being an improviser. So there are nights where I can tell I'm doing a worse job of listening.
Like in the moment or when you look back on it?
In the moment.
Okay.
I sometimes realize, sometimes I get a little caught up in just the logistics of, sometimes I'm aware of, I have 3 minutes left. There are 2 more things I want to ask. And so when you realize when your mind's also doing that, you're probably not
as in it
on the end of every sentence.
I'm keeping an eye on my time too.
Yeah,
exactly.
no, that's a part of it. And by the way, it's as unobtrusive as possible. We have somebody who just flashes a card for me, but
yeah,
and it's very rare. But sometimes
you're more conscious of that. Than other times.
Sometimes there's and I try not to have a blueprint of how much I want to have happen in an interview.
Right.
But sometimes there's something important that you realize, I do want to make sure I ask this, and so
Same.
And you probably know this as well, but sometimes people are very long-winded in their answer, and then while they're talking, if you have a finite time, you then have to start dropping the other things you were going to ask.
The order of importance.
Yeah,
which is different on live TV than
yes.
it is on like we can trim stuff on this, for example,
and you have. I mean, it is interesting to do talk show interviews in an era where there is a thriving podcast industry, because ultimately now. If you love someone, I'm guessing you might get more
out of an
hour-long podcast than. But who knows? I do think you just realize, these are 2 different things, and I have to be aware that I don't have to go that deep with this person, because there are now other options for where people can get that depth.
I guess so. Yeah. And also our attention spans are shrinking, so you have to keep it quicker.
But it's so interesting. I think they're shrinking if you can't do a second thing. I think the great thing about podcasts is that you can listen to them and do a second thing. I don't know if people can exercise and watch my show as well as they could exercise and listen to this conversation. And we do.
Totally.
If we can take a moment for whoever's exercising and listening right now, keep it up.
Shout out.
Keep it up. I think you're doing great. Yeah. That's
weird.
good. I think we both agree they're doing great.
You mentioned like Johnny Carson, and I want to go back to that idea of like you said, and I think it's true, writing on your own only gets you so far, and you do need other input.
Yes.
But the influences in your life, like you said that you reenacted Monty Python skits.
Yeah.
So would you recommend that's like, does that actually help you construct comedy or familiarize yourself with how comedy works? If you're like, Johnny Carson asks a question this way, like does that help your interviewing, or Monty Python? Then I kind of get how comedy works now.
I think I wouldn't say, like, I remember there was a kind of person I knew who would approach it encyclopedically. Like, I'm going to watch everything. I'm going to, I think, like, if you are someone who wants to be in comedy, if you just watch things, the important things are going to get through to you. Like, I don't.
Subconsciously?
Yeah. Again, I wasn't reenacting Monty Python skits to learn about them. I was reenacting them because I thought it would be fun to do, and then in the process learned about them. But it was very little of it was ever done with a end result in mind.
Of a career.
It was very lucky that my first job in show business was on the show that I feel like taught me the skills that got me my job in show business. I definitely learned how to write on Saturday Night Live by watching Saturday Night Live.
Amazing.
I don't think I'm the only person that's true of. Obviously, it's weird that there's this show out there that has been around for so long that people have also used it as their education.
So bizarre. Yeah.
And then obviously now and then from there I came to another format, which was this is another thing that I've been watching on and off for my whole life. Just the idea of late night shows. So it wasn't. In neither case, in neither case, I should say, was it a reinvention of the wheel. It was just, what could I bring to this that's different, while at the same time understanding the pieces that go into it.
Basic format. Yeah. And that's been true of this gig,
yes.
we can call it, that you're not reinventing the wheel, but you do look to make tweaks. Like, I remember you stood up at first, and then you said, I'm going to do what's comfortable.
Yeah. It was so funny to be wrong about what would make me comfortable.
Maybe it's more important than people realize.
Yeah, I think there's also that, fortune favors the brave idea of just take these big risks and
see what happens.
Yeah, and see what happens. But the reality was, like, I started the show when I was 40 years old. The reality was, like, I was good at the things I was good at, and
Yeah.
I don't know if like you're supposed to go out and figure out a whole new skill set at that point. I think ultimately like they give you these jobs for the existing skill sets you have, but part of me wanted to say to the world, "Hey, I'm not just this." And then over the course of 18 months, I was like, "Oh, I liked what I just was. I liked that I was just that."
Oh yeah.
You know, it took me a long time to get that good at the thing I was good at, and I don't. And there was then I look back and I think, oh, that was very egotistical of me to think I'm going to be equally as good as this thing I just started as I am at the thing I put 12 and a half years into at that point.
It sounds like it was a very public identity crisis, or rather it was almost like it could have been.
It could have been. I will say I realized it was the public part that was incredibly rewarding to hear is as soon as I sat down, literally not one person said, "I miss you standing." You know, like it was there was not, "Hey, let's get the feedback."
So feedback is important.
I think it is nice when it backs up what you have decided on your own. It's great.
Yeah. Do you ever think about that thing of like, I got to listen to the negative feedback if I'm going to listen to the positive?
Sure. I mean, we listened to negative feedback as well. And that was a case, I should say, where it was pretty resoundingly positive only.
Yeah, sure.
And in the lead up, one of the things that pushed us towards sitting down in the first place was, I think, listening to some negative feedback as well, which, again, is helpful.
Sure.
Oh, constructively.
Yeah, as it should be. You've worked in this building since 2001.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty breakneck speed.
Yeah,
and you've somehow got like also a personal life, and there's all of that aspect to it. Periods of doubt.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to talk about that.
Which, again, it's like you're in the public eye, so you can't exactly be like, I'm so depressed I can't function like on live TV. Like you,
right.
But like anyone, you have periods of doubt, and you have periods of...
Yeah.
Often on this podcast, we talk about with working actors about their periods of dry spells or like lots of rejections.
Yes.
What's the equivalent for you?
Well, certainly the hardest part for me, and I've spoken about this before, but you show up at SNL and you think, oh my God, I'm going to be the next Will Ferrell. And then you walk down the hall and you see the picture of Will Ferrell, but then you see the pictures of everybody else and you realize, oh, they're not all Will Ferrells. And there's some people that kind of come and go very quickly on this show. And then by your second day, you start thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to be that one. I'm going to be the guy who comes and goes. And, it was a real... My first 3 years on the show, I think if I didn't have that writing skill set, I don't know if I would have made it. And the other worst thing about SNL, and I'm sure this is true of any performer community, but that one is so intensely close, is you are competing against the people who are your friends. And there's this finite amount of space.
Wow.
And oftentimes their good weeks line up with your bad weeks. There's very rarely a time where everyone's collectively succeeding equally.
Wow.
And then you start disliking yourself because not only are you not doing great, but you're also resenting people you love for doing well, which then makes you feel even worse about yourself.
And you're physically depleted and just stressed.
Yeah. Nothing was worse than there were certain Thursdays where that's when you start rehearsing the show at SNL, where you just wouldn't have anything, and they would say, you got the day off. And you would think, a day off should be awesome. But, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to go see the dentist. Pick up my dry cleaning. But then you just
ashamed.
sit. Yeah, you don't want to be out and about. And, the other weird thing about working at SNL is if you get on a sitcom that, it's a new sitcom, not everybody knows what it is. They might not all watch it. Like when you get on SNL, like not only do all your friends, but your grandma knows what it is. Like they all,
bizarre. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, and so they all know exactly how well you're doing every week.
Yeah.
And it's not like, how's that show doing? Oh, good. Yeah, the ratings are good. It's a 1-1 with a 4 in the demo. Like none of it.
No.
Like it's just a real thing. They know exactly how well you're doing. Yeah. And so, it was really hard. And I was, for me, the very much the life raft was getting to become a writer on the show as well. And then pretty soon after that, finding my way to Weekend Update. And that was like being the writer on the show and being on Weekend Update was the first time that I thought, oh, I am now on most weeks giving as much to this show as I'm getting from it. And it had not been that case up to that point. I felt like I'd been stealing from the show.
And you mentioned earlier the thing of like you were very much a smaller acting role than in these other scenes, and so maybe something that was scripted but not a character.
Yes, my range was very much lined up with Good Evening, I'm Seth Meyers. That's I think as far as the characters I'm best
at it.
Ideally sitting. I'm not even good at me standing.
Sure.
That's how little my range is. I'm me in one position.
But you're one of the best sitters out there.
Yeah. But if you need Seth Meyers standing, they actually go out and cast it.
Who do they cast? Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe, yeah. And then they tell him he's got to lose head weight.
That's incredible. I want to ask. Okay, I have to get to the audience questions.
Oh, great! Audience questions.
We have
this
audience
is exciting.
Questions, which you said that you get all the time.
I do like audience questions, so I will.
We've never really done this.
Maybe I'll be honest. If somebody asks me a question that I've heard 100 times, I'll be honest.
Sure. Well, okay. And I do know that at Watchberry on HBO did ask, "What is your advice for young writers and comedians?" Which we already covered. Do you have a biggest regret from your time on SNL? Asks at Film Ayers.
It really would be that, and again, we touched on it a little, but, and it's, I think it's true for everybody. I just wish that, and it got a lot better in the second half of my time there. I wish I'd been scared less so that I could appreciate that I was at this really magical place. But unfortunately, I think that's not unique to me. Uh-huh. It's so great that you're worried it's going to be taken away. And so I wish I had gone, I wish that I could go back on my first day and have someone tell me, like, just so you know, you're going to be here for 12 and a half years. And then I really would have enjoyed all of it.
Because maybe you were thinking even in short term, and so it's super stressful. You got to get it right.
Super stressful. And, this happens to a lot of people. There was a summer where, you're supposed to find out, I think, June 15th, whether or not they're bringing you back. And they said, hey, we'd like to wait till July 15th. And so, and you just have to sort of wait a month. And ultimately what they're saying there is, and we're just going to look around for a month. And as long as we don't find someone we like more than you, we would love to have you back. And so that's just a scary thing to come. Yeah. And also, you just can't. Comedy's a weird thing. You can't decide on Monday, this is the week I'm going to be really funny. You just can't, you can't work hard. It's not like going to the gym each week. And if you just go and you just do the weights the way they prescribe you to do the weights, you're going to get stronger. Like, it just doesn't happen at the speed you want it to happen. So,
and fear is not necessary. It is something that you would need a time machine from your future self to tell you to calm down.
Yes.
It's not really doable to just get rid of it in the present.
It's really not.
Yeah. Who has been the most influential person on your career, says at Watchberry on HBO?
I would say there's two. Amy Poehler. I was really lucky to start at SNL with her because, I was already somebody who looked up to her, and then she was this incredibly kind person. We were new at the same time, but she was far more established than I was in show business. She'd already, been on television shows, been in movies, and so she had her feet far more firmly planted on the ground and was very kind to take me sort of along on the ride with her. And I think the fact that she treated me like somebody worth hanging out with was a real important currency for my time at SNL. And then Mike Shoemaker, who was a producer there and now is my producer. He was somebody who always was very honest, and I made a decision early on to trust and listen to him, and that has not led me astray.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of, especially getting here in 2001, like being the least experienced and maybe even like the least knowledgeable person in the room is what's super helpful. It's that thing of the ladder that you're throwing to other people.
Yes.
And it sounds like that has been a commonality of like you've ended up never safe and comfortable. No, you've not mastered everything.
Right.
There's always like room to grow.
Yeah. I think that especially with a show like this one right now where when people do shows like these, they do them for a long time if they go well. And so you have to, I think that you can never say, well, this is it. We're doing it as good as it can be done now. If you ever assume that you've reached the pinnacle, like that's when I think it starts falling apart a little bit. Yeah. And there's always room to improve, and the show can change. So you have to look for ways to keep it changing.
Yeah. And I think you do such an amazing job of that.
Oh, thank you.
And you have wiggle room too. Like I loved that you said earlier that you write these sketches. You learn to write for other people, and I feel like the current iteration of that is jokes Seth can't tell.
Yes. Well, that's mostly just getting to be in a 3-shop with 2 incredibly talented performers, and it is because again, we tried in the beginning to have a lot of different backgrounds in our show and our writing staff. And one of the things about that was realizing, different backgrounds at some point do write things that would be better delivered than by someone like me. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people on our staff who are also performers. And so taking advantage of that's been a real blast.
And was it kind of a group decision I kind of feel like you're one of the only late night people who is kind of meta about the writing and talks about the writer's room, like, and what's going on in there and what worked and what didn't. And like when a joke bombs, you seem to really enjoy that.
Yeah, I enjoy that. It's great. I mean, I've told so many jokes on television. We're coming up on 20 years, and I think if you count up the jokes I've told, you would think that I would never be wrong. At least, I'm not saying that I would, but I would never think they would work and then have them not. And that's still really funny to me. And it's that great thing about comedy, which is, God, you'd think I'd know what would work now.
Right.
And I was so wrong.
But like you said, every day is different. You don't wake up and be like, I'm funny.
Every day is different. Every audience is different. But, it's, and again, like, I think there's that other thing of the jokes. We worked exactly as hard on the jokes that worked than the jokes that didn't.
Yeah. You didn't half-ass anything.
No, I remember when I first started going to LA, I would take like just general meetings when I was on SNL, and you could get general meetings. You couldn't get cast and things, but they would meet with you. And there were places where you'd go in, and there would be posters, so many posters on the wall of terrible movies, that they'd produced. Oh. And I remember once saying to somebody, I'm shocked they have those posters up, and they were saying they worked exactly as hard on that movie as the ones that worked. That was a year of their lives, and they didn't. If they had a poster of a movie that worked in there as well, they'd worked exactly as hard on that one.
Yeah, that's showbiz.
And so that was it's nice to remember that too.
Sure.
I think there's a kind of criticism that assumes, and it's not much of it, but it was particularly true at SNL where people would say like, I guess the writers, we're hungover from a party this week. And I'm like, no, just bad. We were like, but I promise you it wasn't lazy.
Just us.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's almost the advice that comes from that is like, work hard on everything. Mm-hmm. Highbrow, lowbrow. If you think it's going to be terrible, if you think it's going to win an Oscar.
Well, I think that's the great thing about SNL is the hardest working people in my era, and there were a lot of hardworking people, but the Andy Samberg and the Lonely Island, those guys, the most lowbrow humor that was treated like the Sistine Chapel. I mean, the amount of work they put into it, the amount of, they would bring you in to look at an edit and say, do you like it more this way or that way? And you could not tell the difference because it was such But they were just, and they took it so seriously, and I think that's why those pieces endure even now. Like there was nothing about them was dashed off.
Perfectionism is kind of key.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly, and I don't know if there's any such thing as perfection in comedy, but I think the people that aim for it end up closer.
Yeah. We had a lot of people asking about Frisbee.
Oh, that's nice.
How is Frisbee?
She's good. She is, for whatever reason, my 3-year-old and Frisbee never clicked, but Frisbee's super into our 1-year-old, and he is with her, and so there's a lot of licking and kissing. And laughing, and so it's good. We were a little worried it was going to be Frisbee was going to be on the outside looking in, but now I feel like it's going to be her and the 1-year-old against the world.
It is like having 3 kids.
Yeah. Although Frisbee would probably take issue with that and say like, you guys are pretty used to treat me like a kid. You guys are definitely treating me like a dog now.
Like a dog now? Yeah. Oh no. And obviously we had lots of people asking for like messages of hope for aspiring entertainers, which is very much our podcast's thing.
Sure.
So I do want to ask that question, and then I want to get to what the Backstage staff wanted to ask, which is, do you have a message of hope for Americans?
Which one do you want first?
Actors first.
Okay, actors first. Yeah, I would say that
or entertainers, I should say.
Entertainers, sure. I think my message of hope would be that, if you really believe you have something to say and something to share, you have to put your heart into getting that message out there, and you have to, if there's that message that's in you that you, be it your talent or be it something you want to say specific to the moment we're living in, just keep working on your instrument. If you're a writer, keep working on it. If you're a performer, keep working on it, because if you value it, there's a high likelihood that the audience will value it too. But they will, going back to what we were saying about hard work, like they're going to see the work you put into it. And if you aren't going to put the work into it, the audience will tell that you actually don't think it's that important either. And then from a distance, showbiz looks fun and easy. And up close, it is... it's fun and hard. It is still fun. That part's good. Yeah. But it's
that's
hard.
really good to hear. Yeah. Oh, amazing.
And then my message for America is that there's never been a permanent moment in American political history. It would be an incredible coincidence if this was the first one. So
that's a good point.
And there's these really nice opportunities to change things at ballot boxes, and we saw it in the midterms, and we have got another one coming up, and it's actually farther away than you think based on how much people are talking about it, but might as well register and do all those things you're supposed to do. But it's nice. It's nice we live in a place that, I think there are probably a lot of people listening to this podcast that think things are really bad right now, and I would echo those sentiments. But we do still live in a place where we're allowed to go and vote and tell people what we think. So hopefully there'll be a majority of people who hold that opinion.
Yeah. Oh, that was really good. Seth, thank you.
Lovely to meet you.
This was so great. In the Envelope, an awards podcast, is recorded at Lotus Productions, Hyperbolic Audio, and Big Yellow Duck in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Krause Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, tweet us at In the Envelope, leave a review. We want to hear from you. Visit Backstage.com for more content and resources for working artists, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage with a free trial by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout. Thanks as always to podcast producer Wiz, Jamie Muffett. You can follow him on Twitter at Jamie Music NYC. You can follow me, Jack Smart, on Twitter at Jack Smart Writes. Thank you to the team at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting: Mark Stinson, Samantha Sherlock, Francis Ramos, Caitlin Watkins, and especially should-be Oscar nominee Kasey Howe. Thanks for listening.
I took a little issue with Melisandre trying to start the fire. Remember?
Oh, just like being too slow at it?
Well, since when are the magic powers like a Chevy in a horror movie? It was like, zh, 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 zh. There was a few moments where I'm like, what? So wait, what is...
It was cold?
Yeah, but also, it's like, oh no, the fire went out. I'm like, how did you guys not... You have two dragons.
You had two dragons. Where's the backup plan?
Your dragons.
She wasn't scheduled to be there.
She wasn't scheduled to be there, right? Exactly. But also, like, we've never seen one of her spells like it only worked on the 8th try.